Hi everybody, on today's dive brief I'm running through some do's and don'ts on using a dive compass. Even if you're not just swimming from one point to another by following a bearing, a compass is a really useful tool for navigating. Just take a glance at the compass at the start of the dive, and then in your head during that dive, when you have that mind map, if you ever get turned around, you can take a look and just recalibrate so that you know roughly which way things are. Where you place your compass is very important. Remember that compasses are just magnets, so if you place it right next to something with an electrical current or that is magnetic, it's going to skew your compass. So try to strap your compass somewhere secure, traditionally on a wrist or on the back of your hand, and then or somewhere that you can hold it out in front of you as well. So obviously there's no point in keeping it in a pocket. If it is in a pocket, it can often rattle around, and while it is quite rare, the compass can actually break and pop off the spindle. You either have wrist-mounted compasses or gauge-mounted compasses or actual digital compasses built into your dive computer today. Either way, strap it to an arm or on your hip with your gauges so that it's not bouncing around. Whilst most compasses are tilt compensating, it's best if you can hold them as horizontal as possible so that the card can spin freely. The card sits on a pin, and whilst it can take a small amount of tilting, too much and it will actually stop spinning. If your compass is on your wrist, then hold one arm straight out in front of you and your compass hand holding onto your elbow so that your compass is right there in front of you. If it's on your wrist and you're swimming horizontally, then chances are it's going to be flat in front of you. For gauge mounted compasses, just look at the card, the actual spinny bit, and see that the card is flat inside the capsule and it's free to actually turn and wobble. Some actually have teeny tiny little bubbles on the inside that you can actually use as a bit of a spirit level to help you work out what is perfectly horizontal. Setting a bearing is really easy, and there are two ways of setting that bearing. On the bezel around the top of the compass, you'll have a bunch of numbers. These are your bearings that you're going to be heading towards. Turn the bezel so that the bearing that you want is in line with the red, and that's kind of it. The red line is that imaginary line that you'll imagine that you're swimming along. We call it the lubber line. Once the bezel is set, then just turn yourself until north sits in that little gate where there's two little notches, and you're good to go. You're swimming along that bearing. On a dive compass, you'll have a side window as well where you can see the edge of the compass with a bunch of numbers from the card. Those numbers are still those compass bearings that you're facing, so they'll actually line up with the one that's on your bezel. Once you're facing in the right way, just turn the bezel so that north arrow sits in that little gate, those two little notches, and then that way, as long as north is in the gate, you're swimming in the right direction. And if you want to swim straight back again, you just put south in the little gate, or just point north to the opposing digit. More and more dive computers have compasses built into them. They all work in their own special ways, so different buttons do different things, but usually have one button that you can press to set a bearing, but you do have to be facing that direction. It's not like you can type in a bearing that you want to figure out and then it will point you in the right direction. You kind of have to be facing that direction first, and you'll just have a little arrow dancing around the screen to point you which way to face. Either that or you just have a north arrow that again just dances around the screen. Digital compasses often need recalibrating from time to time. They'll often display like a figure of 8 to get you to calibrate it, but what they don't always tell you is that you actually need to twist the face as you do it. Some you need to rotate on two separate axes to calibrate it, but otherwise they work much the same as an analog compass. Just keep them as flat as possible and away from anything that might skew your compass, like a magnet or more electronics. While you're using the compass, it's important to actually look up, because your depth will probably change if you find yourself just staring at the compass and not thinking about anything else. Only ever glance at your compass from time to time. Don't just stare at it and fixate, because you're just going to go off. You'll be heading in the right direction, but somewhere that you don't want to be. Unless your gear is really lopsided or you have one especially strong leg, you're probably going to be swimming in a more or less straight line, so you don't have to keep an eye on that compass too often. If you're swimming along and then you check your compass and then you keep checking your compass from time to time and you keep becoming off by a few degrees each time, then just check it more frequently, but resist the temptation to just stare at it. Just like an underwater camera, divers focusing on one thing too much, they just forget about their buoyancy and they find themselves just drifting off upwards or downwards, which are both pretty dangerous. So before the dive, you can always ask your buddy to monitor your depth whilst you focus on the compass, so you each have that task and you can work as a team. And those are the basics of scuba compasses, really. They're pretty simple. They're a fundamental tool as well that should come with you on every single dive. I know I bring one, especially if I'm diving in poor visibility. If you don't have a compass yet, we have a whole bunch on simplyscuba.com that you can have. I'm going to pop a link down in the description below and probably one up there as well, so you can check them out. Take this time to subscribe to the Simply Scuba channel by clicking that subscribe button down kind of there-ish, depending on your screen. And of course, head over to our Instagram or just search for @simplyscuba. Thank you for watching, everybody, and of course, safe diving.